We indeed have more transaction data than I would guess anyone else, right? We see transactions from 400 million users across 30 million merchants. And in addition to that, we also have web node data, right? You might have had a pizza last night here in Cannes, and you may share the bill with a friend, or we have honey browser data. So we've truly a lot of data. But the key for me is less about how do we differentiate with merchants? The question is more, how can we actually work together with merchants? What can we do to jointly actually help them to sell more? Because we have such a deeper understanding of consumers. So we do, for example, great work with a Best Buy or a Sephora, just to name two, where we are helping them by extending their own kind of advertising operations. It could be from an insights perspective, it could be from a measurement perspective, it could be from a media perspective. And so we see us more as an amplifier, as an enabler, as opposed to a competitor.
So, Mark, commerce media obviously continues to grow phenomenally. However, seemingly measurement and incrementality don't seem to have been keeping pace. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So how does PayPal's position in the checkout moment change how you prove ROI?
It's a great question. And if you think about what we have to offer, right? We have on the one hand our own identity graph, which is powered by our 400 million users. And the key difference here is that we truly know who you are because we're leveraging the payment rails. And that is actually key from a measurement and incrementality perspective, because we can do it based on deterministic data as opposed to just proxies or lookalike modeling. And as I mentioned earlier, as we see now the transaction data across all of these merchants, it gives us, to your point, the ability to really measure holistically across all the merchants, right? And so if an advertiser runs a campaign, and a transaction may happen, right? The transaction may happen on either merchant 1 or merchant 2 or merchant 3. And we can see all of that and we can measure. And hence, as we have this kind of horizontal view, we can share with the advertisers what is the true ROI, how is merchant 1 performing versus merchant 2, which is a question about incrementality. And so we can help the merchants to answer the two most fundamental questions, which is, what is my market share across all the merchants? What can I do to actually increase my market share? And then secondly, where should I deploy my spending across these merchants? Where do I get the most incremental return? And again, we can only do so because of the identity layer and because of the transaction data that sits across all of them.
Mark, I have to ask you the inevitable AI question. Obviously, AI is changing everything at the moment. Commerce media is obviously one of those areas. But wanted to know, what's your sense of where AI is adding the most value to advertisers? Is it targeting? Is it creative optimization, measurement, or something else?
I think right now there are kind of two main areas where AI comes into play. The first one is more on the operation side. What can I do to streamline my ad operations processes, my analytics processes? How can I provide faster kind of measurement back to advertisers? It's more kind of the efficiency side. The second thing, which I think as an industry is much more interesting, which is how is AI actually changing consumer behavior? Right? And we see in our data that consumers are no longer starting their customer journey on search. They start in LLMs, right? Eventually they go to merchants and make transactions, but they quite often actually skip the search step in between. And that actually gives us, I think, really new, exciting opportunities to change the way how we actually think about advertising, think about where to connect to consumers. And it also means that a merchant, right, as opposed to running a search campaign trying to pull people into their own online stores, the advertisers, actually the merchants, need to be where the consumers are. And so from our perspective, one way of doing it is now with what we call a storefront ad, a shoppable ad unit, where we bring the store of a merchant to the consumer, wherever he or she is. It might be on the open web, it might be in LMs, and that gives the merchants the reach that they otherwise would eventually miss out, as people are again starting the customer journey in a different way.
So, Mark, given that expansive reach that PayPal has, it's become so commonplace for consumers, certainly in terms of their transactions, it's almost easy to take for granted that you're increasingly moving to the physical transactional space, physical commerce. How do you help advertisers think about commerce media as a full funnel then, versus just bottom funnel?
Yeah, I mean, most of us, right, started kind of on the lower funnel, really more performance focused, closer to the transaction. But to your point, the big opportunity is indeed if you do connect the upper funnel with the lower funnel tactics. And that's, I think, where our transaction data comes into play, because we do know who actually has transacted, and then we can leverage the data to basically go upper funnel, right, and reach the right audiences. So for example, we have launched a CTV offering where we do exactly that. We use the data, then bring that to the CTV environments for targeting, but most importantly also from a measurement perspective. And that's how we can now truly close the loop. And as I mentioned earlier, the big difference in our case is if you run a CTV campaign, with most providers, you can only measure what happens on their own merchant properties. In our case, we can show after someone was exposed to a CTV campaign what happened at any merchant, right? And that's why we can provide a much richer closed loop attribution. We can show true ROI as opposed to just a fraction what may happen on one single merchant.
So, Mark, just to go a little bit deeper onto those points about how you have closed the loop for an attribution, wanted to know, as commerce media continues to grow phenomenally, it continues its expansion, and also is becoming more competitive. So, with that in mind, what's PayPal's unique advantage for advertisers who have those kinds of options?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have the identity layer, right? Which is a key differentiator, especially with all the latest news in our industry. Having an identity layer across 400 million users is differentiating and kind of the backbone, the foundation of what we have. We have our transaction graph, again, very unique. We have more data than anyone in our industry based on transactions and Venmo and Honey. We have our own inventory, Venmo, right? Super attractive audience for many of our advertisers as PayPal is, and then we can go into offsite. We have our own creative ad format, shoppable ad, which is kind of collapsing the shopper journey with 1-2 clicks into a conversion, which is great. And we spoke about measurement. So we basically have kind of really full stack solution, which we launched over the last 18 months. And so for us this year here at Cannes, it was less about adding yet another feature. It was more about demonstrating that what we've built over the last month actually does perform. And so here it was about showcasing that, for example, our campaigns with Adorama performed perfectly well. And we had something like 7-8 ROAS. We proved incrementality for Adorama. We had campaign successes with Best Buy, similar range in terms of ROAS. And so for us, it was really about, we have built the foundations, we have all the capabilities, we have all the data. Let's now show how it actually performs and how it's actually bringing the value to advertisers that on paper makes so much sense. Everyone is telling me, sure, why not, right? And now we say, we have the proof point, let's scale the business. And so for me, Cannes is really about proving that it works. And now we are going into a rapid scaling and growth phase.